Oh, it's better. Okay. You can hear me. Amazing. Thank you guys so much. I really appreciate you coming out today. I'm going to get started in a second. Thank you guys for with me with the technology. I know that it's one of those things that all of us have kind of been working on to make sure that we're all good. Just a last check. Everyone can hear and see me and see the presentation. Just yes in the chat would be amazing. Love it. Okay, we're gonna get started. So today's session is about resume writing. So if you have a pen, a piece of paper, a computer, something with you just to take some notes, because you're gonna get lots of information here today to really learn how to tell your story through your resume. Okay, so a little bit more about me. I'm a career consultant. I work at Ryerson University, but I started my career in recruitment actually, and hiring new grads, hiring newcomers to Canada. I spent a lot of time working with individuals who are looking to enter the job force, but not necessarily making the right decisions. So I really wanted to be on the other side of that to see if I can help people before they came to a recruiter, to see if they could find the best opportunities for them to launch their career. So what I would always recommend when you're starting to write your resume or starting to tweak your resume, I know that some people have been, I saw someone in the chat that was laid off after 24 years in the same place. I think it's important to kind of do a little bit of a soul search and start again by asking yourself, questions about who you are and what it is that you're looking for. So what I did is I created this word chart over here just to identify some words that I kind of identify with, right? So you can see things like people focused, creative, entrepreneur, right? And all these different identifiers, depending on who you are as an individual or just who you are as a professional, are really, really important as well. So let's move on to telling your story. So I know that some of our professionals are going to be talking about different aspects of this process, but I really wanted to spend some time looking at how to tell your story. Okay, so when you're starting off or transitioning, it's important to really identify where you currently are. Right? So that is taking inventory of your education, the current experiences that you have, looking through and really analyzing what skills that you have. And the most important one that people don't really pay attention to is really your outlook, right? Are you looking at this time as an opportunity to really explore and take it to the next level, figure out what's going on? Or are you looking at it as an opportunity where you're panicked and you're just kind of trying to grab the next thing because there's obviously payments, there's bills that are coming up. Your outlook is going to make a huge difference when you're looking at your job search. The end point will then be where you want to go. So it's really important to identify what your end goal might look like. And that end goal could be 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line, or it really could be just 1 year down the line. Maybe that's just where you can see for right now. But it's really, really important to identify point A and point B, or else it's going to be hard to kind of figure out how to get there, right? I always tell my students it's kind of like mapping out your journey, right? If you lived in Markham and you were coming downtown Toronto, you need to know that you're going downtown Toronto to know that you need to take highways that are leading south, and you're not just kind of seeing what fits or driving around and wasting a lot of gas, which I see a lot of job seekers doing. So how do you get there is what we're hoping to do today, specifically focused on the resume. So the resume, Is that better? Okay, I turned off my AC. I think that was what was going on. Thank you guys so much for really letting me know in the chat. I really appreciate it. Okay, so going back to telling that story, what I was talking about is when you're telling your story through your resume, you always want to think of the audience, right? So in this case, your audience is actually 3 different individuals. Your audience, the first person that's looking at your resume, sometimes is not even a human being. And I'm sure you guys have obviously heard about the applicant tracking system. So that's a piece of technology that is screening your resume before an individual actually looks at it. So you want to make sure that your resume is set up in that way to monitor that. So keywords are really, really important at that point. Then you want to make sure that your resume is optimized for recruiters. Recruiters are looking for skill sets. They've just read their job description. Their job description says, hey, I need XYZ. They need to be able to see XYZ clearly outlined on your resume, okay? And then the hiring manager is going to be looking at the relevant experiences, right? Are you driving value? Are you able to provide information that they care about? So these are the 3 different audiences, and it's important to cater to every single one of them, because if you don't cater to the ATS, no one's going to read it. If you don't cater to the recruiter, they're not going to pass it off to the hiring manager. I hope that's making sense. Okay. So the resume has a few different sections, right? 5 sections is usually ideal. If yours is a little bit longer, that's totally fine as well, depending on what you're including to it. But essentially, you should have a professional profile. This is especially important right now if you're in transition, right? Or if you're looking to completely pivot from where you're currently at. Then there's a summary of qualifications section where we're talking about optimizing those skill sets, your experience section, and your education section. So depending on how far away you are from your education. So if you graduated, last year, then education goes to the top. If you graduated 6, 7, 10 years ago, education flips to the bottom. So those 2 are interchangeable. And then lastly, community engagement and volunteer opportunities. Okay? That professional profile, if you think about it, is what a lot of you guys have already started doing in the chat from the first session, that quick elevator pitch of who you are, right? This is the first thing that a recruiter is going to see. So it's really, really important to make sure that it's quick and it's to the point. You're hoping to answer 3 smaller questions, right? And you can actually do this in networking sessions. You can do this in the interview portion, but you can also highlight it on your resume, right? So those 3 smaller questions are, who are you? What have you done? What are you looking for, right? Who are you is how you identify in terms of your professional background, right? The resume ideally should be 1 page. 2 pages is the max. So if you have upwards of 10 to 15 years of experience, then you can start flipping into 2 pages. But ideally, 1 page is kind of what we're looking for. And there's tons of different tricks that we can do to make sure that that fits all in that space. So going back to the professional profile, we're looking at who are you, what have you done, what are you looking for, who are you being, how do you identify as a professional, right? If you're a student, that's the biggest thing that's coming up, right? If you've spent 5 years in HR, that's the thing that's coming up, right? What have you done is where you're then really giving us more information about what's relevant for this particular position, right? So it's, I created this formula that I absolutely love, but it's years plus function plus industry, right? And it works almost every single time because it helps you to holistically capture your experiences. So you're no longer saying, I've done this, I've done that, I've done the other. You're putting it all together saying, I have 10 years of experience in HR, consulting, career coaching, what have you. And then you're highlighting some of the industries that make sense, right? If you have drastically different functions, then spend your time really putting information into that function. Anna asked, should this information be in bullet points? Not necessarily. So we're looking for 2 to 3 lines of a statement at the top. So summary of skills is where you then include bullet points, but at this point, it's just 2 to 3 lines of a quick intro to who you are, okay? And then what are you looking for is really where you're gonna make that change, right? A lot of folks, especially right now, are in transition. This is where you really highlight what you're interested in, right? So just because you've done something in the past doesn't necessarily mean that you're gonna do it again, which is why you wanna make sure that you're showcasing the experience properly. You don't want this section to be too specific, and you don't want it to be too broad. Too broad would be saying I'm looking to get a job in business. That's way too broad. Too specific would be I'm looking to be a business analyst at TD Bank. Because ultimately what's going to happen, and I see it all the time, is you're going to accidentally send that email or that resume to RBC. I see it all the time, where you get so specific at that point and you end up making those changes. So it's a combination of those two. Alexis has a question here. It says, what if you did more than the job itself? That's a great question, and we can come to that, and we can chat about that offline in the networking portion, just because I want to be mindful of time. The summary of skills section is really where you spend a lot of your time catering to the recruiter, like what we talked about before, right? 5 bullet points is ideal, right? Which is why we're keeping that resume down to 1. 5 bullet points is ideal. 4 of those bullet points focus on soft skills, and the last bullet point should focus on hard skills, okay? And the difference between those two is just how long it takes you to learn that skill and how transferable that skill is, right? A soft skill is a skill set that you build over time through different activities. So your communication skills can be built up through working in sales or customer service or doing presentations, facilitating workshops, all these different ways your communication skills can be built up, right? Whereas your technical skills or your hard skills are more related to different technologies that you know how to use, or even different subject matters that you're engrossed in, right? So if you know how to use this particular technology and for a specific process, then that would be a hard skill. Your soft skills are the ones that are transferable from job to job, which is why you have to give us examples, okay? When you're building out these bullet points, so this section is in bullet points, you highlight the skill, and then you give us a tangible example that showcases that skill, right? So a quick example here, I have here communication skills shown through 2 years of sales experience in telecommunications. That same format that we used before, years plus function plus industry, apply again here, right? And the idea is that you're not just telling us, I see all the time, great written and spoken communication skills. That doesn't really tell me much. How did you develop those skills? Those are the pieces I want to know, right? So that's how you build out that section. Your hard skills are very simple. You can just list them in a bullet point, all the different technologies that you can. I'm gonna give you a tip here that is gonna change lives. As you're applying to many different jobs, you're gonna have tons of different skill sets being required of you. But what's more important is how they're required of you. So what I want everyone to do is just create a blank sheet of paper, blank document, write down all of their skill sets and all the different examples of how they develop that skill. So communication could have like 6 or 7 bullet points underneath that of how they develop that through a past experience. That way, when you're looking at a job description and it says, hey, communication, but communication from a writing reports perspective, you just copy and paste that bullet point rather than having to rewrite that summary of qualifications section, okay? I want to talk quickly about the experience section. So this is a section that takes a lot of time to write for individuals, and the summary of qualifications too. Your resume will take time to write, but essentially you want to use this particular formula that I've created here. A resume action verb is just a verb that's used to really describe your action in a specific role. So if you Google resume action verbs, you'll see a list of them. That's the first word that should come up, right? You should then be able to quantify or give details about your activity. So the hows and the whys, and then you have to give us a result and you want to quantify that as well, right? And I'm happy to share this slide deck afterwards if necessary, because I know this is quite a bit of information for a short period of time. But the idea is that you can use some of these examples that we've used here to basically structure that. Let's move over to the format of that space. The format should really be what, where, when. If you have more space on your resume, you can stack them. So what and then where. But if you're really trying to save space, it could be what, when, where. So like we've talked about before, it would be, let's say, analyst at BMO, and you would have the dates on that side like that, okay? The education and certification section is very straightforward, right? You wanna have your most recent education at the top. You wanna highlight the end dates. This is really important. Unless it's a decent while away, you don't necessarily need to include that. But if it's fairly recent in the last 10 or 15 years, you can definitely include that as well. You want to clearly state your university program and your degree. And this format is usually the best way to do it. Okay? Your volunteer and community engagement section over here is one piece where you highlight everything that you've done outside of going to work and going to class. Okay? I mostly work with students, so this is very relevant there. But in this group of people that have experiences, your experiences are going to be much grander, and you should be taking on opportunities outside of your, your daily life. So, for instance, Toronto Jobs is not going to go on my resume under speaking sessions, right? So, being able to add information to your resume that are outside of your normal duties of 9 to 5. And if you were obviously a student, or a new grad or a master's student or whatever, you would have that information at that point. That's pretty much the end of the presentation. I can flip back to the experience now that we have a little bit more time, just to quickly talk. And I want to look through and see if there's any questions here. Oop, my screen just disappeared. Okay, there we go. So Anuj is asking, should we involve all qualifications if we're overqualified for a job? Absolutely not. You're providing relevant pieces of information. What people are looking for is they're looking to have, like I said, relevant pieces of information, because if you put everything in that space and that description, people are going to get lost. And I see this all the time with job seekers. I want to include all the things that I've done, all the experiences that I've done. It's amazing. I want to showcase that I can do X, Y, Z. We only care about the things that we can showcase and we need for what we're looking for. So tell us what we want to know. Okay. Rajapopal, he says, yes, please do share the deck. Okay. Okay, I'll definitely share the deck out. Does anyone have any other questions related to any section on the resume? And I've lost my slide deck. Okay, yes, it's back here. So your experience section over here, like I said, the action verb plus details about the activity plus your results is what you're gonna use to highlight that experience. So an example that I've put in here, conducted quarterly employee engagement surveys. So that's the activity, right? And we're talking about how or why. So using SurveyMonkey, which is the how. The why is to boost morale. And then the result is what actually happened as a result of what you did, right? So it's very straightforward, especially if you're highlighting bigger projects or, even just your day-to-day duties. You want to make sure that you're putting in a way that there is always some kind of a result that's quantified, that's helpful for us to understand. Okay? So I have a few questions here. Anna, how to edit resume from position different to experience, for a position different to your experiences. So that's the summary of skills section, right? So what we're talking about before in their summary of skills, saying, I have this skill gotten from this experience. That's basically what you're doing, right? And I can probably do a session as well, if Toronto Jobs will have me, on how to properly read job descriptions and identify you don't necessarily want to date yourself in that way, you can definitely take that off. At the end of the day, your experience will be able to speak for itself. Okay? Gansham, I hope I pronounced that properly. To get shortlisted by ATS, what percent of the resume should match the job description? It doesn't, ideally, 60 to 70% is usually fine. There are some ATSs that will look for 100% match, but it's not really wise because a lot of people don't necessarily have that. There's a really cool tool called Job Scan. I don't know if you've heard about it, but essentially you can put the job description in one box. You can put in your resume in the other box, and it'll tell you how much of a percentage that you match. And it's free to use up until a specific point. And I think you can pay for a premium if you feel you wanted to do so. Okay, Laurie, are there too many points per experience? So per experience, you should really and truly have 4 to 5 points, especially if you have longer experiences. I usually tell my students 3 points is usually best, but 4 to 5 is usually what we're looking for there. Tanwinveer, what if we don't have experience in the field we want to enter? I have qualifications HR but don't have experience. Absolutely, there's tons of other things that you can do in terms of your extracurricular experiences that you can showcase and use that to showcase on that space. There are a lot of questions that are coming in. There are a lot of questions that are coming in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be available on the people chat because I think we're at 1:50. If you wanted to network in that perspective, I'll be available till about 2:30. And then we can ask those particular questions. I'm so sorry that I didn't realize that the audio wasn't working, but I hope people are able to hear the last thing I just mentioned about checking in with me on the networking portion. So sorry about that. If that is it, please transfer over to the networking portion. I will be able to chat with you then. Thank you so much. Have a good day, everyone.